Welcome back to the program. So earlier today, had some dental work done, so not feeling great. So I took a nap and I woke up and it's about midnight. But the show must go on no matter what. So the first thing I want to talk about, we're going to talk about two things today, and then I'm going to cut out. Okay. The first thing is this court that no one's ever really heard of in New York that is very inconsequential decided to step in and try to block President Trump's tariffs, okay? Now, it's being reported that, that's it. You can't have the tariffs, and Canada and China and Mexico and all the other countries during Liberation Day, right? The 10% on all the rest and this and that. But when you kind of break it down a little bit closer, you realize that this is pretty sure going to get overturned on appeal. But more importantly than that, it's really an easy thing, but more like just a pain in the ass with paperwork to kind of appeal. Let me explain. So this federal court stepped in, and they are basically saying that President Trump exceeded his authority to impose tariffs under the IEEPA, which I'll explain here in a second. And of course, they have appealed this immediately. So I'll read a little bit and then I'll break it down. The Court of International Trade in New York, again, a small court, inconsequential, doesn't mean anything, filled with leftists, basically, or old guard, Republican establishment judges, whatever, on Wednesday said that President Trump exceeded his authority to impose tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977. The order halts Trump's 30% tariffs on China, his 25% tariffs on some goods and imported other items from Mexico and Canada, and the 10% universal tariffs on most goods coming into the United States. It does not, however, affect the 25% tariffs on automobiles, automotive parts, steel industry, aluminum, and many more. Those were subject to Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, a completely different law that one Trump person cited for the broader trade actions. So last week, U.S. District Judge T. Kent Weatherall suggested that President Trump had the authority to impose tariffs under the IEEPA, a ruling from the 1970s, but did not issue an order. So this judge basically agreed that Trump can do this, but he's a chicken, and he didn't issue an order, and instead punted the responsibility to another court. And so the left saw that and they said, oh, we have an opportunity to find our activist judges on this, international trade, court in New York, where all leftists are for the most part. And we're going to try to stop him. Okay. So again, more activist judges. Now, according to the judge, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977 gives President Trump the authority to set tariffs, here's the kicker, for every single reason other than raising revenue. Weatherall wrote that Trump's jurisdiction for the tariffs, both stemming the flow of illicit drugs into the country and resolving trade imbalances, is sufficient to satisfy the terms set by Congress. Now, here's where the judge messed up. However, rather than issuing an order, this judge punted the case and the responsibility from the federal court to another court and then to the International Trade Court. The judge transferred one of the lawsuits to the federal court in New York, where obviously they all hate Trump, right? So on Wednesday, a 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of International Trade ruled President Trump exceeded his authority to unilaterally impose tariffs under the IEEPA. The three-judge panel included Gary Katzman, an Obama appointee, Timothy Rife, a Trump appointee, and Jane Rastrani, a Reagan appointee. So you have Obama on the left. You have old Reagan judges are typically not that conservative anymore. So basically you have a moderate or leftist judge. And then supposedly a Trump judge, supposed to be good, but the Trump judge was the only one that ruled okay. The other two, three panel, there you go. That's what happened. So how does he get around this? Well, there's a couple ways to do it. What the court is saying and what the law says, the 1977 law, is that the president has the authority to issue and negotiate trade and tariffs so long as the number one goal or reason isn't to just, quote, raise revenue, right, or raise money. Now, President Trump obviously is talking about Liberation Day and we're going to bring in so much money and this and that. So technically that's kind of a violation of this act. But the reality is all the Trump administration has to do, and the lawyers, and it's going to be a tedious thing to do because they're going to have to come up with thousands, probably of thousands and thousands of papers, and it's just a lot of bull and it's a lot of garbage and it's a lot of just, drawing out the clock, running out the clock type of situation. But the reality is that they have to prove that the revenue was just a byproduct of the real goal at hand. And the real goal at hand is trade imbalances, unfair trade practices with other countries, right? The other thing was the part where they said that you have to be able to do this and make sure that whatever you're doing is not going to be solely based on raising revenue. Well, obviously, it's going to raise revenue no matter what if you have a trade imbalance and you fix that trade imbalance. But also, he has to argue, or the lawyers have to argue, the Department of Justice in this case, they have to argue that it was a national security reason too, right? And clearly it was. Fentanyl coming in from China and, the open border. And so we're basically losing our ability to protect American workers. So that becomes a national security reason. Yes, revenue is going to be part of this. So now they have to kind of rework the whole thing. They have to resubmit everything. And they have to basically show the court on appeal that the reason for the tariffs were for financial and national security reasons, not just revenue or, having that be the lead. Okay? Does that make sense? I think it does. I don't know. Maybe I didn't explain it 100%. So the bottom line is it's a temporary adjustment. They're appealing it. It's going to take some time. And just like everything else, it's going to have to go through, and it's going to probably go to the Supreme Court. And it's either going to go to the Supreme Court or another court. And then at that point, assuming he, wins the ability to do tariffs. This is crazy stuff, okay? Of course he has the right and the authority to do tariffs. He's the president of the United States. And so it's just a bunch of activist judges, once again, trying to stop President Trump. And it doesn't matter what it is, okay? They're going to try to continue to do this. And so, sadly, we've got to deal with this bullshit, okay? So that's that. And that's what's going on with that. Now, let's talk about this Autopen thing. Holy cow. We're hearing reports now that one of the people that was in charge of the Autopen was probably Hunter Biden himself. Gee, I wonder if Hunter Biden pardoned himself? Perhaps. Certainly sounds like it, okay? So there have been multiple felonies here. Multiple felonies committed, okay? And it's not an opinion. It's not hearsay. It is fact. And because Biden had no clue what was happening, he was basically mentally incapacitated, okay, for 4 years. Did he have maybe one or two little moments of clarity? Yeah, maybe so, but not enough. So as questions swirl around Joe Biden's cognitive state and the absentee leadership, new scrutiny is falling on the use of the presidential Autopen by Biden staffers, an automated signature device that has been used to sign executive orders and potentially even pardons. Again, not allowed. These staffers, if all of these reports are accurate and true, which I'm sure they are, engaged in multiple ongoing felonies. House Oversight Chairman Jim Comer has said legislative subpoenas have already been sent out, and the crimes that they could be pursuing, I'm going to go through. But there are so many crimes, so many real felonies with real consequences. Nearly all of Biden's official signatures were done with the Autopen. The Biden White House even issued criminal pardons with the Autopen. So these people that were let out of jail, or the Biden family being off the hook, and isn't it interesting that they only cared about the Biden family and protecting him? They didn't care about all the rest of the people. And I'm glad they didn't, because I was worried that they were going to issue thousands at the last few days. I was terrified that they were going to do that, and I'm glad that they didn't. But using the Autopen to do pardons, yeah, that's not going to fly, okay? And then it goes on to talk about some of the different things. So the Oversight Project identified at least 2 different separate signatures that were used by the Autopen, and including the Biden pardons as well. Now, he could not have signed them because he wasn't in the country at the time when they were being signed. So obviously, somebody knew about it, okay? And by the way, why isn't Kamala Harris being dragged into all this? She was supposedly the vice president, was she not? So what did she know, and when did she know it? She knew the whole time, okay? The entire time. Unbelievable. So Project Veritas released a video. I'll try to put it in here so you can see it, okay? But they released a video of the vice chairman of the DNC. This is that little pipsqueak, David Hogg, who, by the way, I have a lot of history with, because when he was just a child, his claim to fame was through the Stoneman Douglas shooting on Valentine's Day, Nicholas Cruz shooting in Florida at the high school. And somehow, there's a lot of questions, somehow he was able to videotape in the school a live shooting as it was happening. And so at the time, I had a lot of questions about that, and the left attacked me like you cannot believe. Maybe some of you have been with me that long, you probably even remember when I talked about that. But anyway, so he's the DNC chairman. He was caught undercover by Project Veritas, basically saying that he knew, so in other words, he's admitting a crime as well. He knew that there were numerous people that were running the Autopen, basically, and running, the entire administration, the fake administration. So you'll see that video. But he talks about one person in particular, and he says it was Jill Biden's chief of staff, okay? And this guy is, his last name is Bernal. Let's see. Where is it? I have it in here somewhere. I'll get to it in a second. So it's in this article. Okay, and so here's the rest of this. So he then says that everyone was afraid of this person. He was somebody that nobody really knew of, didn't know where he came from or anything like that, but he wielded a ton of power, okay? So if the reports are accurate that the White House staff may have used Biden's Autopen to execute official acts without his direct knowledge for consent, the legal implications are as follows. They have committed multiple felonies. U.S. Code 18, forgery of United States documents. It is a crime to falsely make or use any writing for the purpose of defrauding the United States, signing the president's name via Autopen on legal instruments without his direct authorization is a textbook example. Maximum penalty, 20 years in prison. U.S. Code 18-912, impersonation of a federal officer. Again, another felony. Pretending to be the president, even indirectly, by authorizing acts in his name while exercising that power unlawfully, that is a 3 to 5 year sentence. U.S. Code 181001, making false statements. Any deception involving a material act of government, especially in formal documents, exposes the staffers, and that is a 5 to 8 year prison sentence per attempt, meaning per count. So however many times these people did the Autopen, it's 5 to 8 each one. U.S. Code, 18371, conspiracy to defraud the United States of America. If multiple officials coordinated such actions, even internally, it is prosecutable as conspiracy, and those are 10-year to 12-year sentences. U.S. Code 1503 and 1512, obstruction of justice. If any falsified pardons were used to derail or stop criminal proceedings, such as the Hunter Biden pardon that stopped his charges and likely his sentencing and his indictments and everything else, that's obstruction of justice too. That's 20 years, okay? More. U.S. Code 1341 and 1343, potentially wire or mail fraud. The use of emails, phone communications, or interagency transmissions to process these fraudulent signatures may trigger additional felonies, such as wire and or mail fraud. A key legal question is going to be who knew what and who knew when, since Biden's cognitive decline was obviously and was obvious to anyone paying attention, incomplete decline, and the Justice Department Attorney Robert Hur even noted it, obviously, in the Hur report, that he was basically incapacitated for all intents and purposes here. So the 25th Amendment to the Constitution, passed in 1967, was created to deal with a situation just like this, an incapacitation of a president. When a president can no longer do the duties that he or she was elected to do, then they have the right, his cabinet has the right to issue a 25th Amendment, and they rectify that, okay? Now, it can also be used in very short, stints as well. For instance, George W. Bush gave up the presidency for 8 hours because he had a colonoscopy, okay? Ronald Reagan, had a screening for cancer and gave up the presidency for 3 or 4 hours. That's what the 25th is for. When the president cannot perform their duties, whether long-term or short-term, you invoke the 25th. But think about this. These animals knowingly ran an incapacitated, brain-dead person for president while simultaneously running on the fact that if you elect us, we'll stop the constitutional threat from Donald Trump. And meanwhile, they steal an election, and what do? They actually usurp power, they destroy the country, and they run a committee of unelected people, and they claim that they're there to save democracy. Do you understand how absolutely batshit insane that is? I'm sure you all do. So we're going to see what happens. I think this thing's just heating up. We need a special counsel in the worst way. But I'll go a step further, and I'll say this. I was thinking about this, and I was saying to myself, okay, we have the Autopen scandal. We know that Biden was not running the country for the last 4+ years, okay? And now we have a situation where we have someone that is competent, that is running the country, that is in control, that doesn't use an Autopen to sign, important executive orders and all that good stuff, right? And so I started thinking to myself, Well, how can we also use the Autopen to also stop these judges? Well, I think it's pretty simple. I think if the Department of Justice looks at the fact that these activist judges that are issuing these injunctions, how many of those activist judges have been quote unquote appointed by Joe Biden? There's probably at least half, maybe 60% of the judges. Yeah, some of them are going to be Obama judges. Some of them might be George W. Bush judges. Some of them might be other people's judges. Nothing you can, Clinton judge, nothing I can do about that. Nothing we can do about that. We can't challenge them. But we can challenge a Biden, quote, Biden appointed judge. Because if he is deemed medically incapacitated, which clearly he is, he wasn't making those decisions. He was not appointing these judges. Therefore, these judges are not only unconstitutional, but they don't have the constitutional authority to issue these injunctions. That's what the Department of Justice ought to do. They ought to challenge the validity of these, quote, appointed Biden judges. Go to the court. Now you have the ability to go after the Autopen scandal in and of itself, and also injunctions. You get a 2-for-1 special. Mic drop. That's what I suggest they do. And who knows? Maybe they will. I'll reach out to Wayne and some other people and let them know, hey, this is something we need to get in front of the Department of Justice on. Because quite frankly, this is not just bigger than, Watergate. This is 100,000 times bigger than Watergate. This is the biggest scandal. And I thought COVID was the big scandal. And yes, of course it is. And I thought stealing the 2020 election, of course, is a huge, huge scandal. But this one almost tops all of them, because not only did they steal the election, and not only did they use the pandemic to do it, but now they have a brain dead individual, which we all knew, right? How many times did I say in the last 5+ years, I never said the administration, I never said the Biden administration, not one time did I ever call it the, quote, Biden administration. What did I say? The illegitimate administration. And then once this started to break, I started calling him President Autopen. From day one in 2020, when, late 2019, basically, when I was being thrown off of everything, even back then, before the 2020 election, I was saying that he was illegitimate, that he was brain dead. And then, of course, when they stole it, I kept the same thing. So I have a continuous record of being correct on this. I knew that he was not only brain dead, I knew he was illegitimate. And let's not forget the one moment of clarity that he had, and he said what? We have the greatest voter fraud organization ever put together. There it is. 5 years later, people are now just going, oh, I didn't realize he was brain dead. Really? Well, where the hell have you been? Maybe you're the people that are brain dead. But all these people that are writing books and making money on this and all this other crazy stuff, you're admitting to crimes. David Hogg, on camera, admitting to a crime that he knew that these people were doing what they were doing. Not to mention so many other people that said, I would rather have a brain dead Biden than President Trump. We all knew that he had all these problems. You can't just write these books and make money. You should be prosecuted because you are admitting that you knew about this. Meaning what? That you are concealment. Concealment is another felony. So we'll see what happens. I know they're doing the investigations. I don't want to just have a congressional investigation here. I think we need a special counsel. Let's get Rudy Giuliani or Sean Davis from the Article 3 project, who I thought would be also good for, attorney general or FBI director. I don't know if you guys know who that is. He's great, awesome. We need somebody with some steel balls that's going to look at the swamp and go, we're taking you all down, okay? I don't want to hear that you're revoking, a security clearance. I don't want to hear that you're attacking or filing a lawsuit against a law firm like Perkins Coie that tried to, frame you and all that. Okay, that's wonderful. That's great. Where are the arrests? 30 days, you get a pass. You're brand new, I get it. 60 days, all right, you're just getting settled in. You're hiring people. You're getting to know where the bathroom is. Okay, fine, I get it. 90 days. Okay, at 90 days, I'm expecting some action. And we've seen a little bit here and there that they're starting investigations, right? I mean, you got Letitia James, you got James Comey, you got a couple of others. And so, there's a couple of things working. But we're getting close to 120 days, and I don't see anyone indicted or in jail. And I told you guys in the beginning, I said we need to be patient. But if this gets to the point where it's 120 days plus and nothing's going on, I'm going to raise the volume, and I'm going to continue to raise the volume. Where are the indictments? Where are the investigations? Where are the grand juries? Where are the arrests? We cannot allow this to continue. Otherwise, we continue to have a multiple tier justice system. And that is not going to bode well for Republicans in the midterms. And it's certainly not going to bode well for people on the right in the future. God help us. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Put them down in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one.